Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Just do the Zoom.
Look who's coming alive.
Okay.
You've changed your desks around. We're just going to get right to it. So, Sidibay, we'll talk. Maybe we'll talk about that later. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
Mr.
think.
Cameras coaching. It's kind
Okay.
of good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
It's a little patchy for some reason, but maybe it'll come in. Yeah, it seems to be clearing up.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it
Can
better
you
now
see
or
us?
still?
Yeah, and I'll turn off my. You know what, Ron? I'll turn off my video because they know what I look like. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So, Mohammed, and this is where things get a little sketchy because I call him Sidibay and have since he was like a little boy. But his
Yeah.
name is Mohammed. This is my friend and good friend and somebody who I is definitely one of my heroes. He his name is Mohamed Sidibay and he's from Sierra Leone. Now, did you guys look up where that was on the map?
We did,
You did. So
and we
really
watched the video.
quickly, you watched the videos, both videos. Awesome. So you have a little bit of an idea about Muhammad and what he went through when he was young. And you've just finished reading Boy Overboard, and I think you enjoyed it, and I know Mr. Cameron did. So the connection between Boy Overboard and Muhammad would be that both of the main characters in the book and also Muhammad really believed in education, and then because of that, he sort of became a refugee. So I figured this was a really good opportunity for all of you to hear from somebody who went through a really challenging childhood, but came out to be who is in the process of being a world leader in education for youth and a real advocate for education for everybody, and how his journey as a refugee brought him to that point. So I'm going to turn it over to him and turn off my mic and let Mohammed tell you a little bit about his story. And I hope that you guys were able to get some questions. So we have about an hour, just an hour, okay, Sidibay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to you. And
Okay.
if you need any pictures shown, just let me know and I'll get them up, okay?
All right. Sounds good. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. There we go. Okay, I was worried that we were only going to see an M on the screen, but now we see
Okay. Sounds
it.
good. It's wonderful to be able to join you guys. And as Mali said earlier, I'm very connected to Canada, and I was recently with Canadian Minister of Development and some other high-ranking members of your government, talking about what Canada has done for me over the years. Believe it or not, I'm here today because of steps taken by elementary school kids who at that point, I hadn't met, and I didn't know who they were, to be able to make sure that I go to school, something that we sometimes take for granted. But before going off, let me start from the beginning. I'm originally from Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a small country in the west coast of Africa, and I'm sure some of you have read about it. So Sierra Leone, the capital is Freetown. Um, and the whole reason why Sierra Leone began was slavery was abolished in the UK, and of course, hundreds of years later in the US. And the point was like they needed to find a free country to return slaves to. And Sierra Leone ended up being one of the ports because it's a huge natural has a huge natural harbor, and so it became a country for free slaves. And it started with the Portuguese, and then the British eventually took it over. Sierra Leone, like most African countries, are rich in natural resources. They have everything they need to succeed. But what they've lacked over the years is leadership. That's where my story comes in. When I was 5 years old, the rebels, my country was engulfed in a civil war that predated my birth and that continued a long time after. And so I got involved when I was 5. The rebels came to my village and they murdered my entire family. And it happened in a way where it was completely random. They came and they split groups up. They split 2 groups, and eventually they said like, okay, well, this group will be the survivor for this day, and this group um, will all be killed. And so my family, unfortunately, was in the group that the RUF decided to kill on that particular day. And so they took me with them. I want you to imagine when you were 5 years old. What were you doing? Where were you? Were you playing Nintendo, or what particular game were you playing, or were you out with friends? Um, because when I was 5, it was the reality was completely different. When I was 5, I was handed an AK-47. I was told I was given 2 instructions: kill or be killed. And it's a terrifying thing to understand. Like I want you to imagine your friend sitting next to you, or your best friend, and then I want you to imagine that somebody comes and tell you 1 second after, tell you that you either kill your best friend or they're going to kill you and kill your best friend. What would you do? What would be your state of mind? And so that's the world that I lived in, where it became people took on the role of God, where they decide who lives and who dies, not by any matrix, but just them just and deciding based on how they're feeling. And so when I found myself at 5 holding an AK-47 and being instructed to kill or be killed, I thought that was the end of my life. And believe it or not, at 5 years old, I uh, I made peace with the fact that if I died, that's just the reality of it. Like my life would have ran out its course at that particular time. And so for 4.5 years, I spent um, a year or so after being with the rebels, or less than that, I attempted what some would call crazy. I attempted to run away from the rebels. Um, and I mean, the truth, at 5, like, how far can you really run? So to me, I thought it was a wonderful idea to try to run away from my captors because I still imagined the community that I had left behind. I still imagined the family that I had and everything that was before the war came. I still imagined that I could go back to it, not knowing that it was all gone and not understanding that I wouldn't even know where to begin, how to get to my home. But nevertheless, I started running. I thought that if I ran fast enough, I'll be able to get home. I thought that if I ran fast enough, that no one would catch me. Um, but I was caught. I was caught by the same people who had originally captured me. I was beaten and burned and left for dead. But eventually, I survived. I don't know how I survived or why I survived, but I did. And so for the next 4 years or so, that was my life. Every day knowing that it could be my last day. Every day knowing that it could be my last second, my last minute, my last hour. Of knowing that someone that I love or come to call friends, someone would just stand next to them and give them a gun that they could kill me, not because they wanted to kill me, but because their life depended on it at that very moment, that it was either them or me, or it's either me or them. And so that became the life. And so you learn to distance yourself from everyone. 4 years after the war began, after I'd got involved in the war eventually ended. And at this point, I was battered. I didn't know how to read or write. Um, but I could load and unload an AK-47 faster than you can say you can read from A to Z. and that was a sad world, a world where as a kid I can say like, yes, I cannot read nor write, but I know how to load and unload an AK-47, and
How
it's
old are you
scary.
at this point?
When the war ended, I was 9 years old, a little over 9, when the war ended.
So that was
Um,
2001, you said?
that was 2001. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the war ended because people started asking the why question. People started asking, why were we fighting? Who were we fighting for? Was this the life that we wanted to live, knowing that we could be killed at any second, any minute, any hour? And so, as a result of that, the war eventually ended. So, for me, this meant the beginning of another war, a war where I had to reintegrate back to society, a war where I had to fend for myself. Now, I want you to imagine like you're not 5 anymore, but you're me. You're 9 years old, and you find yourself roaming the streets of your neighborhood, or just imagine the biggest city in Canada, my is, which is Toronto. Just imagine finding yourself in Toronto, roaming, not having a home, not having anywhere to go. Um, what would you do? How would you feel like? Would you feel like there's hope for you? And so for me, that was my life. I was expected to reintegrate back into this community that had no faith in me, this community that was angry because of what they had lost. And although somewhere along the way I too had lost. And so that was so bad. But for me, the unexpected happened. And his name was Rashid Peters. Uh, I'm sure most of you have that friend who just don't know when to stop talking, who is constantly talking and they want to tell you everything. And sometimes you just like, okay, can you just be quiet for 1 second? And for me, that friend was Rashid Peters. And he would always talk to me about this great organization called Iron and the wonderful work that they're doing. And Rashid Peters says like I need to join and that it would be a great organization to be part of. And after being bothered by him for so long, I decided to finally make him a deal. And the deal was simple, that I would go to this organization of his in return for him to promise to never talk to me again. And so for me, I thought that was a great deal. And he says, okay, deal. And so I went.
What was it called? I Earn? Or.
Yes, IEARN,
Okay.
International Education and Resources Network.
Okay,
That was
cool.
that was the name of the organization. And I went. And because I went, my life soon took a different course. Um, but before going back to getting to the point of Iron and Rashid, when the war ended, with the help of UNICEF, uh, inadequately rather, I found myself enrolled in school. But UNICEF enrolled me in school without really giving me the support that I needed to learn, without really giving me the support that I needed um, to excel. They just dropped me at school and left me there to fend for myself. Uh, and I was only able to remain in school at that very point because of a girl who taught me how to read, and a girl who taught me how to write. And as a result of that, I was able to remain in school up until the point when Rashid came around. When I went to the Iron Center, I thought it was wonderful. There were computers. It was the first time I've ever used a computer. It was the first time I'd ever been close to a computer. We're talking about like Windows 98, kind of like computer, which I'm sure most of you probably will never get to see, but there were these like clunky computers that you use like a flash disk to play video game or what have you not. And then Rashid and Iron introduced me to a wonderful woman called Anita, who came to Sierra Leone and she was the principal at WHD Elementary School. Anita brought my story back to Canada, which is where I started earlier. And these groups of kids called the Dreamers, who were taught by Molly Beckley, and they decided that they were going to sell pizza and fundraise to ensure that I remain in school. And so, as a result of their generosity, I was able to continue my education in Sierra Leone. My education continued up until the point where I had the opportunity to come to the U.S. That was in 2007. I
Sidibay,
can, yes,
do you want to show a couple pictures of that, of when you were in
yes,
school?
yeah. Do you have them?
Yeah, I do. So, Mine Center. So when Mohammed was in at the Iron Center, there was a movie made. Did you see We Don't Want No War?
Yeah. Wait.
Okay.
Which one?
The one when he was little, We Don't Want No War.
I was going to show that one, and then I saw the other one linked to it, the My Hero one, and so we watched that one. It's like
Okay, so you've got
the 8 minute.
okay, so this is how we met. There's another story sort of behind all of that too. Before Anita went to Sierra Leone, so my friend Jim sent a video camera over to Sierra Leone, and this movie was made as a result of it, the We Don't Want No War. And that's how when Anita brought the movie back, my students, the Dream Team, saw the video and thought it would be really easy. Like it's that was their goal, to send him to school. So I'm just going to share a couple pictures of
Yes.
what what and just tell you a little bit about them. So I have one of the first pictures of you at. Let me just close these ones off
Okay. Let me see if I have this.
because I have his whole life, which is he knows where his pictures are. Just hold on a second. So I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, the phone's ringing. Okay, so the first one. This one is now maybe you can point at which one is she.
Like right there with
Right
the
here.
Arsenal, no, with the Arsenal, with the blue next to the kid that has a big smile. Um, I'm the only one that's not smiling with a blue shirt, and my head is turned, like my body's, yes,
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
Yes.
So this is Mohammed. You were about 9 or 10 when you went to the Iron Center. So
Yep.
all of these students would go to Iron, and this is my flat Stanley actually from my class. So this
Hmm.
is at the Iron Center. They would go and use one or two computers. That's all it was there. So
Yep.
just imagine they didn't have their own Chromebooks, and these were old computers that were donated. And then this is a picture of you at the church, right?
Yep. Yep.
And you were about 12,
Yeah,
13.
I think it was like 12. No, I was about 12 in this picture.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
about 12.
And then so the students in my class raised over the course of 3 years raised about $15,000, and their goal was to send him to school. So this is your first day of school. So I remember that
Yeah.
day because I kept saying to you, "Oh, send me a picture, send me a picture." And so at the end of the day, by the end of your day and the
Yeah.
middle of our day, we knew that this picture was coming. So there he is on
Yeah.
his first day of school and there was only really a choice of going to a private school, right, honey?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So how old is that right there?
This
How,
was, I think it's like,
13.
yes, this is like 13. Yes. This is like
okay.
around 13. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you went right. What kind of school? It was a private school, but what grade did you enter? Like what?
So, I mean, when I started school and when I was 10, I was just put, it's called like in Sierra Leone, it's called like, it's like the fifth grade. And I went in like the fifth grade, I had no idea what was going on. And it was a huge struggle for me because, here I was like, yes, I mean, I was, in the, actually, yeah, I think about the fourth grade or so. But like here I was with kids who were about my age, and I didn't know anything that was going on. Like I didn't understand anything that the teacher was doing or saying. Um, but yeah, so this was 2, 3 years after I'd already been in school when this picture was taken when I switched schools from a public school to a private school. So
And
this
then
is about 2 or 3 years.
here's your friends on the other
Yes. Yeah.
one.
Um, and I was in class. That was in my African geography class with all of the people there in the picture.
Okay, so I'll stop talking now and stop
Yeah.
sharing my screen.
Yeah.
And so now, okay, there you go. So
Um,
I
but
have,
yeah,
I'm like a mother. I have all his photos.
so that was my schooling in Sierra Leone. Uh, and then when I serendipitously, I mean, I call it serendipity because that's how the whole thing happened. But when I serendipitously moved to the US in 2007, it was supposed to be a trip that lasted for a week, but a week has morphed into over 11 years now. I decided to stay in the US, run away from the airport, and I roamed the US for a couple of months. And eventually, Molly was trying to find ways and I told Molly I was still in the U.S. and things weren't that great, and she was trying to find a way. I was like, okay, how do we, illegally or legally or whatever, we're gonna put you in the back of a trunk and smuggle you to the U.S., which was not legal. It still was not legal. So Molly's like, okay, well, how can we bring you to Canada? I'm just gonna drive over and put you in the back of my van, and then drive you across the border or to Canada. And I don't know how that would have ended, but that was the plan. But eventually, I found a home and my family, and I was enrolled in high school in the U.S. 4 years after starting school, I find myself in ninth grade at an American high school. And the learning curve was a steep learning curve. Because I soon realized, like even with my private school education, 2 years of private school education and 2 years of public school education and 4 years of subpar education did not adequately prepare me for a life at an American high school. Um, and so I was behind. I didn't know simple how to put to form a simple sentence, how to write an essay, or how to critically think, because that was not part of my learning process. But I seeked help. I received help from a number of people who believed in me, who wanted to make sure that I succeed, and they did everything they could. And I also did everything that I could at that point to ensure that I do not disappoint the people who would put so much faith in me. So I worked hard. I studied. I read a tremendous amount. And eventually, I graduated high school in the U.S. 4 years after starting high school in the U.S. I graduated high school, and then I went to the U.S. Where I studied, and then sorry, I'm like doing it from home. So like where I graduated, and I went to college. I went to college in DC, and it was the best decision of my life. Um, and I spent 4 years in DC, being involved in various advocacy projects. And of course, after graduation, I went to Colombia, the country where I taught and worked for a little over a year. Um, the point of this latter part of my story is to remind you of the importance of education, that someone can take everything away from you. You can lose everything, but your education is something that you will never lose. Your education is something that will always remain with you no matter what. And education is the only thing that separates you from somebody else. And so it is very, very important. And as we speak right now, believe it or not, there are 260 million kids. Like, I just want you to imagine how big of a number that is. 260 million kids who will never get to go to school, who do not have access to quality education. But more than that 260 million, there is over 300 million kids who are in school, but they're not learning anything, like at all. Like, they're not being prepared to join the workforce. And people in this current day and age, we talk about terrorism, we talk about war and instability, and we have all of those problems because people do not have access to quality education. And so, since graduating university and spending time in Colombia, I focused on how do I ensure that people have the same quality access to education that I have. I'm here, I'm talking to you guys, and you are listening to my story. And I'm not telling you my story because I want to get your sympathy, because I don't need your sympathy, but so that you can understand that not far away from where you call home, there are people who will never get to see the inside of a classroom, not because they don't want to learn and not because they're not intelligent, but because just because of where they were born. They were born in a country. You had no saying in being born Canadian. That wasn't your choice. You didn't go, it's like, okay, well, I want to be born a Canadian, I want to be born an American or a Japanese or what have you not. You were just born a Canadian. The same way people who were born in Afghanistan, who were born in Syria and Iraq had no saying in the part of the world that they were born in. And so, but they've been deprived access to education because of where they were born and where they're from. Uh, and so my fight has brought me all over the world, and it's a fight that it's the road ahead is long. The road ahead to making sure that every kid, regardless of where they're from, regardless of where they were born, have access to quality education is a road that's not it's not easy. And believe it or not, if we continue at this pace at which we're continuing right now, by 2030, there's going to be about half a billion people. That's 500 million people who will not be equipped, who will not be prepared to join the workforce. That's a large number. Like, imagine like the future of 500 million people not being set in stone or not contributing anything at all to society. Um, and my hope is that as I have spoken to you and as about my story and about my vision um, for the world, for education, that you will listen to my story and that you will make a decision um, about your education that would ensure that you value the education that you are receiving, that you understand how fortunate and lucky you are to be able to receive um, the level and standard of the level of education and the quality of education which you are receiving. And as I get ready to go to law school in a couple of months. I never imagined that I would ever be in this situation. My education has given me agency. My education has given me um, a power and a will to stand up to world leaders and tell them, like, you need to do more. You just can't say, like, you're going to do this, but, like, you need to do more to ensure quality education for every child. And so, with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I'm open up to any question or questions that you may have for me.
Wow. Awesome. We were actually in that video that we watched, My Hero
Yeah.
project.
Hmm.
I made a point of pointing out how your accent changed from when you made that first video in 2001. You
Yeah.
could really hear that African accent, and then
Yeah.
to now,
Mm.
it's you can't hear any of that accent anymore. That's
Yeah.
that's crazy. Yeah, you have a beautiful story. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable,
Thanks.
and yeah, I definitely want to watch your other videos up there.
Hmm.
I was thinking, what made you go to Colombia? Why did you want to go to Colombia to teach?
See, Colombia for over 60 years, Colombia was engulfed in a civil war with FARC, a revolutionary Marxist revolutionary group. And Colombia was recruited there. Colombia has over 5,000 child soldiers from within the country that most people don't know about. And so, to me, after college, the decision was made to go to Colombia because there was a peace process that was going on in Colombia at the time, and I wanted to be involved in that peace process. I wanted to remind the Colombian government of what they need to do to ensure that what happened in Sierra Leone did not happen to Colombia. And I arrived in Colombia with no Spanish, hoping to teach kids who were born in poverty, who believe that they will never get to make it out of the communities in which they were born in, who didn't have hope for the future. And so, as a result of that, I figured like it was my responsibility to go there, not to tell them like, hey, I want you to change, but to have them listen to my story, for me to impart my knowledge of life, however little it may be, upon them. And so to me, it was a decision of going to a country that's experiencing a civil war, a country that has child soldiers, and making sure that people do right by those kids. But yeah, that's why I went to Colombia.
That makes sense. So do they? So you said that they were just starting a peace process to
Yes,
sort
the
of
peace
break
process had
everything
been
down.
the peace process had been going on for a while. So after 60 years of a fight, a civil war, although in some part of the country with the revolutionary group FARC, the Colombian government in Cuba decided to reach a peaceful resolution with the FARC to end the 60 year long civil war. And so I went at the time where the negotiation was ongoing, and it was being held in Cuba, of about, okay, how do we get the FARC members to lay down their arms, and their arm, and join the community and be productive members of society. And so this peace process has been going on for years, but it always breaks down at some point because they couldn't reach an agreement between the government and the FARC. The paramilitary FARC group were unable to reach an agreement. And this is the first time that they were actually able to succeed and reached a solution where FARC members will come back into society, and there will be an amnesty provided to them to contribute to society. And so that's what happened. And so the Colombia peace process went through, and as a result of that, Colombia is no longer at war with FARC, which is a tremendous success and advancements for the people of Colombia and for the world.
So could you explain a little bit about what a civil war is?
Yeah.
Like the difference between a civil war and another kind of war. What is a
Okay.
civil war?
A civil war is, for example, I mean, like in your Canadian history, you've probably learned about the British and then the Native Americans fighting each other. In that particular aspect, it will not be known as a civil war. It will be known as invasion and everything else, what have you not. But a civil war is when people within the country decided to create factions. They decided to create two groups that support. They have two different political views, and oftentimes we have civil wars in these countries because of varying political views. And so people decide, like, okay, well, we believe that our political view is better than yours, and so therefore we're going to pick up arms and fight against you. Or oftentimes it's against the government and civilians. And so these civilians use revolutionaries, because they call themselves, will pick up arms and say, we're going to fight against the government because we feel like this government is corrupt. We feel like this government is not giving us what we need, so the people are poor. But these wars oftentimes morphed into something something much more senile, which in the case of Sierra Leone is exactly what happened. The civil war in Sierra Leone started because people rose up against a corrupt government and say, like, we're tired of your corruption and that we need more rights for our people. But eventually, as the war went on, the people turned. The genesis um, of the war, they completely abandoned it, and so it ended up becoming like the rebels who are now killing civilians. The same people they said they started the revolution on behalf of, they were now killing them. And so, but yeah, in short, a civil war is an internal conflict in a country. And you just imagine Canada, people rising up and saying like, okay, well, the government of Canada is not doing enough, and so we're going to fight the government of Canada. But eventually they turn against, the fight. They're no longer fighting against the government of Canada. They're fighting against anyone who they believe supports the government of Canada. And so it end up being complete chaos with thousands of people, innocent people losing their lives, and children not being able to go to school during that time.
No, what are there still child soldiers in Sierra Leone, back in Africa, in different places?
In Sierra Leone, no, because the war has ended for almost 15 years now. But the remnants of the war is still so much so prevalent in our society, in my society, in my country, in Sierra Leone, where child soldiers weren't given the resources necessary to properly reintegrate back into society. And so instead of being productive members of society, they have become they've found themselves involved in crimes and other various illegal activities because, again, there's never a system in place to support them. But all over Africa and the world, there are currently about 250,000 or more child soldiers as we speak.
Wow.
250,000 kids who they didn't have a say. They weren't consulted, but who just because they were born, just because they are, and they were born in that particular part of the world, they've been handed guns, and say like, well, we no longer believe that, like, at 8 years old, someone tells you like you're too old for school, so we're going to give you a gun. We think you can do better with a gun, and that's exactly what happened. And what is happening right now in most African countries, that gives you that astronomical number of 250,000 kids who have been involved in armed conflict around the world.
Crazy.
Do the
Yeah.
students, Ron, do the kids have any questions you'd like to
Do you guys
ask?
have any questions? Think about it. Anybody have any questions for Sidibay?
Do you see any connections between the book and...
When's your birthday? When's your birthday, Mohamed?
This December 13,
Nice.
Sagittarius. Yeah,
Sagittarius.
Nice.
Nice.
I've been told we're a little crazy.
Oh yeah? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
What's that?
How was it during the war?
Sarah asked, how was it during the war? Do you still have like memories of what it was like?
Yeah, I mean the war is very much so part of who I am, and it's always going to be with me. I still have horrible memories of the war, and I tried to suppress them at some point, but I realized like I can no longer do that. And I'm so angry because of everything that happened in the war. But for me, my anger is being directed at fighting for a cause, and this cause is how do I ensure that every kid has access to quality education. And so I still have the scars of the war, and they're always going to be with me. But I figured like if I can help other people receive quality education, then that would sort of like balance it out.
Um, is it okay if I show a couple more pictures just to sort of...
Yeah, I
Sure.
think someone has a question.
Yeah, Matthias, you have a question?
Uh-huh.
What's your question, Matthias?
Did you kill anybody?
Yes, it's one of those things where like I said earlier in a war, and I think no human should ever put no kid or human being should ever put in a situation where they have to make a decision of either it's either you or the next person. If someone that's the world that I lived in, where commanders give me an instruction, and if they tell you shoot this person, and you said no, they're going to shoot that person, or they're going to give that person the gun and tell them to shoot you, and then they're going to shoot that person. So you're always caught in Sophie's choice, which is a choiceless choice. You're not really whatever decision you make is not a good decision. Is equally as bad.
Right. Well, Madison, was it traumatizing?
Yes. It's again, it's a traumatizing experience, and like I just in response to Matthias' question earlier, just imagine losing your entire family, and at this very age, being told like, well, now you're an adult, that you have to fend for yourself. Um, what would you think you would do in that particular situation? Do you think it's a situation that any kid should be in? That you someday just come home, it's like your entire family's gone, your home is no more, and that you're told like, well, now you have to be an adult. Um, and
You're,
that
sorry, go ahead. I thought you were finished.
no, but yeah, no, yeah, that was basically it.
Yeah. Your friend that you said, I'll go check out Iron if you stop talking, do you talk to him
Yeah,
anymore?
I do. Yes, so he's in the UK, and he's doing some wonderful things. Yes, he is. We will still talk. Uh, and now, yes, so now it's much more. It's a different conversation, rather. But yeah, we're still in touch.
Was he a child soldier as well? Or did you just meet
No,
him in Freetown?
no. We met in Freetown. His parents, his father was a priest, a pastor rather, an evangelist. And so we just met. We lived in the same neighborhood. And so yeah, we lived in the same slum, and that's how we met.
So when oh, so when Muhammad was talking about being able to tell his story to world leaders and people who would sort of take that message and make it a little bit bigger, um, I think this is where sort of fate and hard work all sort of work together, and there's obviously a reason that he's been able to tell his story. So I'm just going to share a couple of more pictures of sort of his journey along the way. So this picture here is these are the kids this is the dream team, and when they were 7, so they were in about Mrs. Stewart's grade when we learned about them. But they were in, I think, grade when they came back from high school. They were in high school, right, when this became
Yes,
out.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so they're in grade 9 here, but they're still friends on Facebook, and they still talk to him, and they held their own fundraisers and things like that.
yeah,
And most of these kids now, Mr. Cameron, are in either international development or social work. So they've sort of taken the message of helping others and continuing on. This is a person who obviously but this was at an event for My Hero where Mohammed was invited to be the ambassador for International Peace Day on September 21st. So this was a really important event in Los Angeles. And this lady here in the red is her name is Erin Gruelle, and she wrote a book called The Freedom Writer's Diary. And she worked with disadvantaged youth in Los Angeles and taught them, how would you describe it? She encouraged them to stay in school
yeah.
through writing and how to sort of tell their story and continue their education. And she's become a real advocate. She actually had a movie made about her
Yeah.
that was called The Freedom Writer's Diary, and it was starring Hilary Swank, which was kind of cool. But she's a really great lady. Really become a friend of both of ours, right? Like she's
Yes.
an incredible person and a really great support. And then this picture, when I received it, I like bawled my eyes out. Um, so Mohammed's had the opportunity to take his story to world leaders and let them know what how we need to work together. And this is you guys might not know who this person is. I'm sure Mr. Cameron does, but this is the Dalai Lama, and he is the highest Buddha priest in the world, and he is the sort of symbol of peace. So when you see this gentleman, he is like the symbol of peace throughout the world, and his
And
his
he
whole
travels
mission.
around the world too, right? Like
Yes.
he doesn't just
Yeah.
sit, in an
No,
office
no, he
somewhere in
travels. Yeah,
India.
no.
Yeah.
No, no, he
This
travels. Yeah.
was in India, though, wasn't it, honey?
Yeah, yeah, this is in New Delhi.
This was in
Yeah.
India just last year, and maybe you can tell a little bit about why you're with him because we've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, so I was there's this guy called Kailash Satyarthi. In 2014, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Malala. And he is rescued since 1985 till now. He has rescued over 100 200,000 kids from around the world from human trafficking and sex
What's his
trafficking.
name?
Kailash Satyarthi.
Are you saying Kailash, like with an L?
Yeah, no, Kailash, Kailash.
Okay.
And so Kailash, his foundation, so part of his Nobel gathering is he had this event called Leaders and Laureates and Leaders Summits, in which Kailash is he's my mentor, and so he literally, we were at an event to the UN. He's like, so I'm launching this event, and I want you to be one of my global ambassadors for it, so you're coming to it. And so it was an event of Nobel laureates, Peace Prize winners from all over the world who came, and heads of states who were there to discuss how do we galvanize. The program is called 100 million for 100 million. It's like, how do we, in the campaign, how do we get 100 million people from around the world with access and opportunity to help another 100 million people without access and opportunity? And so while in India, I had the opportunity to have a meeting with Kailash, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama about the current state of the world and about peace and forgiveness, and about the work that I'm doing to ensure that what happened to me did not happen to any other kids around the world. But yeah, so this is that was a byproduct of that meeting where we're about to be at our round table, and it's just like, okay, well, let's have one of these pictures taken.
And then just 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
yeah, this is cool. Sorry, I creeped your Facebook.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So that's Julia Gillard. Julia Gillard was the former Australian Prime Minister. Um, And I was recently at an event called the Global Partnership for Education Financing Conference, and that was being held that was being run by the French president and the Senegalese president on financing education. As I told you guys earlier, there are about 160 million kids who do not have access to quality education. And the point of this conference is like, how do we ask countries like Canada, your Minister of Development, on behalf of the Canadian government, pledged over 100 million Canadian dollars in the next 2 years to fund education around the world. And so this was the opening ceremony right before the high level events began. Like Julie and I were welcoming everyone and telling them about the agenda for the next 2 days.
And then here's your keynote.
Yes, so that's my keynote, and all of those people there on the side who were blurry are presidents. On the very far left is President Macky Sall of Senegal, and then that's President Macron of France, and then President of the Côte d'Ivoire, President of Guinea-Bissau, and then president of um, uh, Zambia, and then of course the vice president of the Gambia. And what made this that of all the list, that woman was the most impressive to me. Was at 14 she was a child bride. Like imagine being 14 and being told to you have to get married. So she was forced to get married at 14. And look at where she is now because of her education. Her education has given her agency, and currently she is the vice president of her country. Because regardless of all the struggles that she went through, she still was able to rise and say like, I am going to get my education. And now she's ensuring that no kid in the Gambia went through what she went through as a girl at 14 years old, being told that she has to get married instead of going to school. And so she was a phenomenal person, and I think her work is inspiring. Her work inspired me. Her journey inspired me to do more in ensuring that kids everywhere around the world have access to quality education.
Awesome.
Maybe just one last. Does anyone at my center have any final questions or comments for Mohamed? And if you ever, and the guys, if you ever have a question for him or something comes up, please, you can do this again, first of all, I'm sure. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then, I can send him the questions. I speak to him. Does anyone have
That's
any
great.
more questions or
Are
comments?
there any more questions right now? Anybody have any more questions? Kayla, did you have a question that you wanted to ask? Okay, we'll talk about that at break. Can you go sit down? Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions? Well, that was really awesome to meet you, Mohamed, and to hear your story. It's very encouraging to see how you came up from that and the things that you're doing. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, thank you for sharing with us and taking time out of your day for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye. Everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
What's that?
What?
I don't know.
Sure.
Molly, you still there?
Nope, she left you.
You still there, Molly?
She's gone. There will be
She
a
might be,
screen there.
because it's still reading. Still recording, I mean.
Yeah, because
So she must still be
This
on.
happens like almost all the time.
Now it's your turn to hang up.
I will hang up.
Bye.